Hi everybody, welcome to our From Zero to Selenium tutorial for beginners. Just about us for a bit, we are Rain the Dog. We are a company that was founded in 2018. Our main goal is to provide the best automation solutions out there. We specialize in large-scale automation infrastructure using Python, Java, and C#. This meetup will be held in Java. If you have any suggestions or that you want some other content or maybe in other languages, please share with us in the content section down below. During this workshop, we'll go over a few key elements of Selenium. The first meetup will deal with requirements and dependencies and also the Maven installation. We'll introduce Webdriver, what does it mean and how to use it for Selenium. And also, we'll give the demo for our final project. The second meetup will deal with what is a web element. We'll learn how to interact with it, and also we will study about different locators that we can locate web element using Selenium. The third meetup will introduce TestNG and test annotation. We'll study how to make your code more reusable. We'll plan the project architecture. While in the last meeting, the fourth one, we'll create our test, we'll study some advanced interaction with web pages, and we'll also add our report to our final project. Before we start, I would like to go over the final project sample flow. In this flow, we'll log into Gmail, we'll make sure that we have reached the Gmail inbox page, and then we'll mouse over one of the messages and delete it. The main purpose of this section is to go over HTML and CSS. By no means we're going to study HTML and CSS in order to build websites. We'll just study the basics of it so we would be able to understand whatever is crucial for an automation developer, especially the HTML tags and the CSS selectors. Think about HTML as the foundation of the house, while CSS as the design and style of the house. A website with just plain HTML will just look dull and uninteresting. HTML is built upon hierarchy. The main tag in any website should be the HTML tag. This is the opening and the closing tag of HTML. By the way, the backslash that you see in the second tag from the left-hand side is the closing tag. Some other more popular tags are head, title, body, which is responsible for all the elements that are visible in a website, and some others such as div, which is a container that can contain several elements. Also, divs can contain other divs inside. Let's have a look in our website. We'll head over to rainthedog.com. Here we have the HTML document. You can see the HTML tag that is open in the document in the top of the file. And also you could see the HTML closing tag. If we look inside the body, we can see that we have this nav menu tags. There is the basic nav tag, and inside each of the menu item contains a link to another location in the website. Here we have the nav menu, and we close the nav menu here. All the other elements are descendants of the nav menu. The ahref, you could see, for example, in the index.php, would lead us to another place. But each one of them represent one of the nav menu items. Attributes are very interesting. A tag, in this case I've just made up a tag which is called ABBR. This tag, you could see that it starts with those brackets, and then we have the attributes. The name of the attribute is in the left-hand side, then we have the equality mark, and then we have the value that is assigned to this attribute. For instance, here we have an ID, a class. We'll learn about ID and class in a second. Here we close this tag. Between the opening tag and the closing tag, we have the text, which is HTML. This is the text that we can find under this tag. The HTML DOM. Here you can see the HTML DOM. This is the hierarchy view of an HTML. DOM is the document object model, and under it it's like a tree. We have the document in the root of it, and the root element is the HTML tag. And under this tag, we have the head, the title, and under the title we have a text, for instance. Also inside the body we have the A, and the attribute of the A is href. We have another element such as h1, and the text under this element is my header. So this is the hierarchy view of HTML. Any web page, more or less, have the same structure. A lot of automation developers ask themselves the question, why do we even need HTML and CSS? Do we have to have this knowledge? Do we need to know how to build websites? Is it important? So I could tell you that I'm not a web designer or a web page developer, but you need to know the basics. You need to know what is an HTML tag, what is an attribute, and also what is CSS, how to use it. We'll continue with the CSS basics. As a reminder, CSS is the styling of the web page. The basic structure of every CSS is the selector, and inside those parentheses, we have the property and the value. Why do we even need it? Because we can have an attribute in any HTML tag. We could say that the background color is this color. We could say that the font family is this font family. We don't need even to use CSS. The thing is that here easily we call the HTML tag, in this case it's body, and we could say that any element that is nested under body would have those attributes. Of course, we can override those attributes, but it can save us a lot of time instead of just implementing in each attribute all of them. Also, we can apply to the same as we saw in the body tag, we can apply to all the h1 tags the same values. We can combine selectors by using a comma. This is a CSS class, and this is something that you should pay attention to because we use it a lot when we deal with automation, especially Selenium. Let's start with an example. Here in the Rain the Dog website, you can see that we have a lot of this. The text has the same style. All of the services that we offer, they have the same style. It's like handwritten font, and you could see that each one of them have the same font. In order to include all of those tags with the same design, I call a class, and under this class I will define the font that I want to use, the styling, the background color, the color that I want to use for the text, whatever I need to do. If I want to have it bold or italic, and then the only thing I need to do is under this HTML tag I need to include the attribute class equals my class in this example. Of course, in Selenium we use a function which is called find element by class name. We'll study that later on. ID is much more interesting than class. Why? Because ID should be unique. So let's say we want to have a tag in our web page that will contain, only this tag will contain this styling, will use ID. This is very important for us as automation developers because whenever we use an ID and we see an ID, we should embrace it because it will help us to locate the element that we want to perform action on in the best possible way. In this example, you might consider that this box with the light green background doesn't let's say we didn't want to have this styling in another place, so we could give this box an ID, and the styling would appear only here, only in those HTML tags. If you want to know, by the way, how to add CSS and HTML to your web page, you could do it in 3 different ways. The first one is to have it inline inside the HTML tag. This method has some disadvantages because this styling would be included only in this line, in this tag. We can have it internally by defining a style tag anywhere in our HTML code. Usually we do it in the header, in the head tag, inside the head tag. And the third way, which is the most preferable way, is to have an external file that we can organize everything from there, and then we can just call this file in our code and use all the classes and IDs that we define for our HTML tags. Before we start, I want to talk about what is Selenium. There are several types of users in Selenium. For instance, Selenium IDE. This is the easiest system component to learn. It's a plugin. Used to be a Firefox plugin, but now you can install it in other browsers as well. You can export the test and then rewrite them. However, the execution time is slow, and the tests that are created by recording are very simplistic. If you want like more sophisticated tests, you'll need to rewrite them anyway. So that's the deal about recording tests. Also, tests that are created by a machine are tests that usually are less readable. For instance, if you'll create also an HTML page using some kind of software and not creating the web page yourself, usually the code will be less readable because a machine created this web page. Selenium Webdriver, which is our main focus in this workshop, is built upon something that we won't speak about here. It's called Selenium RC. That was the prototype of the Selenium Webdriver. It interacts directly with the browser using a particular browser and driver interface. It supports complex testing. It's much faster than Selenium RC, which was the prototype of the Selenium Webdriver. It supports headless browsers. The disadvantage of the Selenium Webdriver, of course, it's that you need coding skills, and also it doesn't have any built-in mechanism for logging or generating test results. You will need to use TestNG. We'll go over TestNG as well during this workshop. Selenium Webdriver is the most popular solution that we currently have for testing web pages and applications. In order to demonstrate the Selenium Webdriver, I want to open a canvas and draw something for you, which I believe will make it much more clearer. We'll start with a simple example. Let's say we have a printer. This printer that we want to execute we want to use this printer. Let's call it a Phantom printer. That's the one that I have in my office, or Epson. And let's say that I want to send a document to the printer from my PC. In the PC I have the program, let's say Google Sheets, and I want to print it. I want to export this document to the printer, and then the printer would print. The printer will have my preferences. Let's say it has I want to print only the odd pages, and I want to print pages 1, 3, and 9, for instance. In order to communicate with the printer, I need to use a printer driver. Why? Because the code of the software in my PC doesn't know each one of the many thousands of printers that are out there. So the driver is responsible for the communication with the printer, and from the other hand, it also can communicate in one endpoint with my software. So the driver serves as a bridge between us and the printer. In a very similar way, Selenium Webdriver serves as a bridge between us, our code, and the web and the browser. Let's say we have our Selenium code with all those line of codes, and we want to execute some actions on web elements that we can find in our browser window. In order to communicate with them, let's say we have Chrome browser. This is the type of the browser that we are using. And we want to send all of those commands. For instance, we want to click on a button that we see in our web page. Instead of rewriting the code for each of the browsers that are out there, let's say I have a Safari and in another computer that I want to execute in another team member of my team, this team member want to execute it on Internet Explorer. So I don't need to rewrite my code, I just need to use a WebDriver to serve as a bridge between my code and the browser. In this case, it will be ChromeDriver. ChromeDriver is an instance of Selenium Webdriver that is also serves as a bridge to our actual Chrome browser. Also, we have a Firefox driver, an Edge driver, a Safari driver, Internet Explorer driver, and other browsers as well. I do hope that this demonstration, that this explanation was clear enough, and now you know much better. That was Selenium Webdriver. Another type of usage in Selenium that we won't deal in this workshop, but it's good for you to know that it does exist. You can investigate it more by yourself, or you can offer us to have some series of meetups or workshop about Selenium Grid. So Selenium Grid is a hub node concept when you run a test on a single machine, which is called hub, but the execution is done on different machines which are called nodes. For instance, let's say I want to run the same test on Internet Explorer, and at the same time I want to run it on Firefox to see if there is any kind of difference between those two browsers. I can use Selenium Grid. Instead of running it one by one, I can run it in a parallel mode. Those two browsers will be executed at the same time. So Selenium Grid is very useful for the concept of parallel testing, but as I said before, we won't deal with that in this course. What is Maven? In order to make our project more efficient, we are going to use Maven as a dependency tool to manage all of our dependencies. Maven's primary goal is to allow developers to comprehend the complete state of development effort. Maven's main purposes is make the build process easy, to provide a uniform build system, and to provide quality project information. All of these are from Maven's website. It also encourages the developers for better practices. What do I mean by dependencies? Let's say that in my project, I want to include the libraries which are responsible for Selenium. Those libraries are not built in just in Java. If Java would include all of the libraries in the world, so it would be impossible to download all of the libraries of Java. So we have two choices. Either that we will download Selenium files, or the other option is to have something that will download it automatically for us. Here Maven gets into the picture. The only thing that we need to do is to include the dependencies in our project. First, before we'll even start with Maven, we'll go over to IntelliJ. By the way, you can use either Eclipse or IntelliJ for Java and everything. I personally prefer to use IntelliJ because I feel it's like a more modern IDE. IDE is Integrated Development Environment. So this is the environment that will write our code and execute it. It will make it much more easy for us than other editors. So we'll start by downloading the IntelliJ IDE. You should go for the Community Edition. The Ultimate Edition is more like for professionals, for companies that need extra features, but for our course and our purposes, the Community is more than sufficient. So if we go back to Maven, we said that this tool will manage our dependencies, which means that whenever I want to include an external library in my code, the only thing that I need to do is to include this dependency in my project, and it will be automatically downloaded. So let's look at the dependency. Here you can see that we have this XML tag, which is very similar to HTML, by the way. So here in this tag, You don't need to remember that or memorize it. We just have the Selenium Java, this is the artifact, and we have the version. Let's say that tomorrow Selenium 4 will be released, the full version, not the beta version, and we will start using that. The only thing that we would have to do in our project is just to change the version from the version that you see here to the version number 4 or 4.1 or whatever it will be. So let's see how do we include Maven in our project. So let's head over to IntelliJ, we'll open it, and then we would start a new project. Here, just make sure that on the left hand side, Maven is marked, Maven is checked. Then click Next. Now you should give a name, it can be any name. Usually we prefer to use camel letters, which means that the first letter of the first word would be in lowercase, and any consecutive word will start with a capital letter and then lowercase letter. Okay, now the project is completed, and we have the first file that is opened, because it's a Maven project, is the pom.xml. This is the main file that will manage all of our dependencies. Now, in order to use this file, the only thing that we need to do is to create dependencies tag. We only need to do it once per project, okay? So don't feel bad about it, just do it once, and then we'll download all the dependencies that we need. So we'll start by including that under the tag of the project. You see the project tag starts in the first line and ends now it's the 16th line. Yes, and you see that IntelliJ is auto-completing that. So we have the dependencies tag. Any external library that we would like to use in our project will be stored here. That's the only place that we need. So how do we find the Selenium dependency that we saw in our slide? First, we can copy that from the slide. Secondly, we can just head over to Google. We can write down Maven dependency, Selenium Maven. Then we'll click on the first search result. This is the website of Maven repository. We have all the repositories stored here. We'll click on the first result, the Selenium Java. And I prefer to take the most stable version, which is not the beta or the alpha version that you can see here. You can see that all the versions of 4 and so on are in alpha. So they are currently in development. We'll start with the most stable release that we have. It's number 3.141.59. So we'll click on it. Okay, after we click, now we need to copy that dependency. You can see the message here is already copied to clipboard, but you can Control-C that if you would like, but it's already in our clipboard. Okay, you can right click on it and then copy for just to be sure. Then we'll go back to IntelliJ, and under the tag that we just created, the dependencies tag, we need to paste the dependency. Okay, now that we have pasted the dependency that we downloaded from the Maven repository website, we can see that the version is the version that we desired. Now the other thing that we need to do is to download the ChromeDriver. You probably remember in our previous example we talked about WebDriver, which is just like the printer driver, the bridge from our code to our browser. So we'll head over to https://chromedriver.chromium.org, and here we can download the Google ChromeDriver. Let's click on it. Now we have many versions that we can download. First, we must make sure that our current browser version matches the version of the ChromeDriver that we want to download. So let's check our browser version first. Here you can see that my version is version 85. something, so it's version 85. The latest version of ChromeDriver is, let's go to downloads. You see there is the current release, and I will search the version that matches my version. I think that any 85 should be sufficient, so I'll skip the 86th version, and according to your operating system you should choose. For instance, I'm using Mac, so I will download the ChromeDriver of Mac OS. Let's start with executing our first Selenium code. We'll head over to IntelliJ in a second after we'll overview this slide. So here I'm using main and not TestNG. Later on in this course we will use TestNG for executing a test. So the first line is WebDriver driver, which is the name of this object, equals new ChromeDriver. What do you guys think that will happen after the new ChromeDriver will be executed? You probably guessed right. A new instance of Chrome, Google Chrome, will be opened. A blank one, by the way. The second line, which we specify driver.get www.google.com, will head over also to Google. Let's build our first file. We'll right click on the Java folder in our project. We'll choose Java class. We'll give it a name. We'll call it example1. In IntelliJ, the shortcut for a main method is PSVM. Now I'll click enter. And now the main is being auto-completed. Let's write down WebDriver driver equals new ChromeDriver. And let's execute it just to see what happens, okay? So we'll right click anywhere in this file and we'll choose run example1.main. As you can see here, a new instance of Google Chrome was opened with a blank page. And the code was already executed. The process is finished, as you can see. Now let's do it a bit more interesting. We'll execute our first Selenium Webdriver command. Here you can see that I omitted the HTTP or HTTPS, so you must include it in order to navigate to google.com. So we'll click enter, we'll start a new line, and here we'll refer to driver.get. Now inside the quotation marks we'll choose HTTP and then www.rainthedog.com. We could do it with Google or whatever. Now we'll right click and run it. And now, as you can see, a new instance of Google Chrome was started, and also we have navigated to Rain the Dog website. Sometimes the programmer can get an exception that the path to the ChromeDriver was not set. In this case, you need either to include it in your global environment variables in your system path, and if you don't know how to do it, you can just specify system.setProperty. The property name, by the way, you probably will get this property name in your exception, will be webdriver.chrome.driver, and here you will include the path to the executable of the ChromeDriver that you just downloaded. Let's say you were a Windows user, so it will be probably somewhere in C, downloads, and then it can be //ChromeDriver.exe. That's an example for Windows. So if you bump into this problem, you can solve it by specifying this property. Some other actions that we can perform on a WebDriver. A friendly reminder, you need to know that we still don't deal with web elements. We're still in the domain of WebDriver. So let's say we're looking at the line driver.manage.window.fullscreen. This will cause our browser to start in a full screen mode. By the way, if you are not sure what are WebDriver commands, so those are commands that are being performed on the browser itself, not the HTML page, not part of the HTML code. So let's just try it out. Let's specify driver.manage. As you can see here, you have all the commands. If you just write down driver dot, and all of the options will be open. We'll choose manage, we'll choose window, then we'll have another dot, and now we will choose full screen or maximize. We can also, let's right click and run it. Okay, we have an error. The driver executable, yes, I forgot to remove it, so I will just comment it out because I have it in my system path. I don't need it. As you can see here, the driver went inside a full screen mode. When line number 11 was executed, the driver went from the default window to a full screen. Yes, you can see here that we have RDG, automation solution, pipe, welcome. This is the title of Rain the Dog webpage. Let's try to do something more interesting. To add a condition, we'll say that if the page title contains automation solution, we'll print passed. Otherwise, we will print failed. Of course, this is not a proper way to pass or fail a test. We'll study that in another session, in the third session, when we'll deal with TestNG. Let's change the full screen to maximize, so the screen won't take over our desktop, and we'll right click it and run it. Now let's check out the code. Here it was in the console output, it was written passed, because the title did contain automation solution. Of course, if I'll change something, now the S is not a capital S anymore, so now I will get a false value. My test would fail because it does not contain the title that I expected to see. Also, make sure that after you run your tests, especially after each test, you should quit the WebDriver. Why? Because if we won't quit the WebDriver, so after a few tests that we will run, we'll have multiple instances of WebDriver still open, of Chrome open. You can use either quit or close. The difference between the two is whenever you use close, it will close the current tab. If it's the only tab that you currently have, so it also will close the browser. But if you will use quit, it will quit the browser. Now I'll quit all the open browsers that I have, and just let's comment out now the driver.quit, because we don't want to quit after each test, because we want to see the result, because the reason for that is that now we are in the stage of the early development. Whenever this test will be live and will run in a nightly mode, for instance, we'll use quit because we don't want to use too much resources in our computer. Let's say that we are running now 1,000 tests. So in the morning, when we'll come back to work, we'll see that we have 1,000 instances of Chrome just open in our computer. So in order to prevent that, we need to use driver.quit. For these purposes, we'll just comment it out. Okay, the next meetup, we'll deal with web element. What is a web element? We'll study how to interact with web elements, and we'll study what are locators of Selenium. Of course, in the third lesson, we'll study what is TestNG and test annotation and etc. For more info, you can explore our YouTube channels. You have many lectures about Selenium and programming. We are planning few courses. We are now have on air the Python course for beginners, HTML for testers course coming up. You can check it out. Also, you can visit us in Facebook and LinkedIn. Check this out. Give us the thumbs up. If you like this video, of course, give this video the thumbs up. If you have any suggestion or a comment, please do it in the comment section down below. Of course, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do it now and make sure that you click the bell icon in order to get the notifications about the latest videos that we are releasing. That will be all for today. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll meet again in the next session that will deal with web elements.